Mic check, 1, 2, 3.
Check.
Mic check, 1.
Check. All right, you guys can start off. First question.
We say Florida-Georgia weekend. What does that mean to you?
It's a festivity. It's all of it is so much that I think everyone looks forward to, like an entire event. It's not just the game. When people show up here, you're obviously expecting great tailgating. You're expecting an atmosphere that you really can't get anywhere else. And I think that sometimes people forget how great Florida-Georgia is when it comes to being just one of the best rivalries in all of college football. And that's what this week will remind people of, specifically because this game means more than even some in the past that have meant a lot. So I think all eyes in the college football world will be on Jacksonville, and it gives this town, it gives both teams, it gives everybody an opportunity to really show what they're made of.
SEC championship, you think the winner of this game will head there?
It seems like it. There are certainly scenarios where maybe that doesn't happen, but very unlikely. So this really is kind of a de facto SEC East championship. And the interesting thing about that is, specifically with both of these teams being one-loss teams, is that there's still a possibility they could make it to the playoff. Whichever team wins this game and then plays again in the SEC East championship, or the SEC championship, they have a chance to maybe knock off an Alabama, an LSU, whoever the West representative is, and then if you do that, you're in the college football playoff. So I think it's fascinating for Florida in the sense that Dan Mullen's come in, everybody said, look, you got to come in and remake this program. He's done that in such a quick time period, and then on the Georgia side of things, they've been right there, and this feels like a game that they cannot lose if they're looking to continue to be a factor on the national landscape. So the stakes are very high on both sides.
As a Florida Gator, is it
a little bit like just talk about Dan being able to turn Florida around so quick?
Yeah, it's amazing what Dan Mullen's done, and I think when you even look at the standpoint of the talent that they have on this team, Mullen's still trying to get his guys in there. He's still trying to get guys that he can truly implement the system that he wants to, and so being able to get the absolute most out of every single player on Florida's roster has been really impressive, and we've seen that play out. I mean, look, the LSU-Florida game was a close game. We were actually just talking about that. I was just talking about that with Marcus Spears. The fact that game, and you look, if Florida had Zuniga, if they had Grenard in that game, I think it could have been a different scenario. I'm not saying they would have won, but it would have been even closer than it already was. So just getting the most out of guys, and I think too, when you play against Dan Mullen or coach against him, you're always thinking in the back of your mind, what does he have up his sleeve? Because there's so much that he can do, and he's become known for that. So it's just a great example of somebody that was the right hire for a job, who's gone on to have that success that was expected out of him. And once again, as they always are, Florida fans' expectations are really high, and I think they should be, because this is a Florida team under Dan Mullen's leadership that's not satisfied with anything less than championships.
What do you see on the Georgia side of things, Laura?
So it's going to be fascinating to see what Jake Fromm does in this game. And I think the scary thing for Florida is, and really anybody that faces Georgia at this point, is Georgia's being told that they're not very good right now. And they're a really talented team. So when you tell Georgia that they're not very good, it seems like in the past and consistently over the past couple years, that's been when they've really turned it on, and they've either made it to the national championship game, made it to the college football playoff, or been right on the cusp. Playing an Alabama team in the SEC championship last year, so close that it felt like they were one of the 4 best teams in the country. And all of you may know this, I was advocating for that. I thought that they should have been in the college football playoff last year. So I think they're a team that is hungry. I think with Cager coming back and maybe Campbell on the other side of things, they're going to be at full strength, and I like seeing that. I think they're in a scenario where when they have their weapons, and specifically Cager offensively, you think about this game last year, Jake Fromm on 3rd down, it was so incredibly important in this game. All of his touchdowns that he threw in the game were on 3rd down. So having Cager as that weapon potentially in 3rd down matchups, I just believe that they're going to be a really tough out for anybody that faces them going forward, and definitely Florida tomorrow.
Give us a sneak peek on what we can see on SEC Nation.
Oh, we have all kinds of exciting stuff planned. I think the cool thing about this show is that this game is so big that it has its own Hall of Fame. It has its own specific history book that goes along with it. And so we have a lot of the guys who have been a part of the game on our show. We're going to have special guests throughout the show. Obviously, Tim Tebow's here. We've got Marcus Spears here, Marty Smith, Paul Feinbaum, and we're going to be breaking down the game. So every single segment of the show, you will hear something about this game that's happening right behind us tomorrow. And I think that's going to be really unique. We're going to tell you some things that you couldn't hear otherwise about matchups that you should watch in the game. and just really give you a sneak peek into what we think will happen, as well as profiling some of the great names that have been parts of these teams and parts of the history books associated with this great rivalry.
What are some of the matchups that you think will define this game?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is Florida's D-line against Georgia's offense, and specifically the offensive line, but even just the offense as a whole. You've got to think that Georgia is, they've heard all of the stuff out there saying, hey, they're predictable, they don't stretch the field enough. So they're going to want to stretch the field. I think they want to do that anyway, but Florida will do everything they can to keep them off schedule. And I think watching that chess game is going to be fascinating. Todd Grantham, you guys know this, he's not had success against Georgia since he left Georgia. So who knows exactly why that is. There could be many things involved, but especially with a Georgia team that's looking for a little bit of redemption from these past couple games, going against their former D coordinator, a lot of motivation there. He's motivated on his side. I just think the cat and mouse game with that's going to be fascinating.
There's been a lot of debate about the location of the game after the city extended the contract. What's your stance on it?
I love this game being in Jacksonville, and being somebody who went to Florida, who certainly knows this rivalry very well and has had my own experience with this rivalry, and I love it. I just don't think it would feel the same if it's not in Jacksonville, and the way that this city embraces this entire thing is just second to none. So I was thrilled to see that it got extended, and hopefully it carries on this way. I mean, you even look back to when this was started in 1933. The reason why the game was played here is because train travel was easier for both teams. The history of this is just too good to say, yeah, let's move the game. I think there's too much at stake to do that. So I hope it stays here for the foreseeable future.
Your prediction for tomorrow?
So I'm not going to give you a game prediction or pick the game, because I don't usually do that when I'm hosting the show. But what I would say is that I think it's going to be one for the ages. And you think about, the great Larry Munson calls and all of these things that have become synonymous with this rivalry and with the history of this, and it just feels like tomorrow's going to have some of those huge moments. So I actually think it'll be a defensive play on either side that ends up really getting this thing won or lost. And if you look at that, you could pick either defense because they're both really good. So either way, I think we're in for an incredible treat.
One last question.
I'm going to switch gears here for a second.
What's up?
I'm going to switch gears. Can I get your opinion on how you feel about the whole college athletes getting paid?
Yeah, so obviously this has been an incredibly hot topic here lately, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And unfortunately, I think the NCAA in the recent news this week hasn't done much to help their case. And we're in a scenario now where there's such a movement to make this happen, and especially to allow for compensation for name and likeness for these athletes, which I agree with. I think they should be able to profit off of their name and likeness. So the swell of support for that is not going away anytime soon, and the NCAA is going to have to get with the program on that, I believe, for this to end up working out at all in their favor. So wasn't a huge fan of the way that things developed earlier on in the week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi.
Hey, what's up? How are you?
How are you?
Congratulations on the role. It's good. I was trying to get you some drinks.
Killing it.
Hanging out.
Well, thank you.
We're not in the same town.
What are you doing tomorrow? You're coming to games or what? Oh, good. Love it.
I could have catch you
Family's good. Baby is with
My audio is
my
voice memo, so
parents right now.
Okay.
This Josh had and some other
we can, I can just send you this. We can line
busy
that
doing
up.
that, but it's like so weird to be a part of it because I'm so used to just like
I'm probably gonna piece it all together.
it's good.
I keep up with a lot of mutual people.
Yes, I know.
Still with Rachel Todd all the time.
I love it. I was just
That's the reason. You're the reason.
Just gotta really see how it's going.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm moving. Okay, I'm gonna run. But it's so good to see you. Yes.
Yes. How y'all doing? What's going on?
We ready?
Everybody good?
Initial impressions of the game.
That's a big one. It's probably, quite frankly, going to determine the East, but metaphorically, it's one of these teams are going to be able to possibly assert themselves in the conversation as far as college football playoffs. So we are in that time of the year where, everybody game is kind of meaning a whole lot more, especially when you get the divisional games and then when you talk about top 10 matchups. So I'm looking forward to this one as much as anyone. It's a great week for it because, quite frankly, we don't have a lot of great games. So to have this going down in Jacksonville on this particular week is a big one. Not only the magnitude of what the future will look like for both of these teams, but also just, Florida, Georgia, Florida, the history, Jacksonville tradition, all of that stuff. But I think beyond that, we're trying to paint this picture of what it's going to look like December, January.
You've obviously been in the trenches at the college and NFL level. Should a team be able to run into an 8-man box, and why does Georgia stick with that strategy, do you think?
Because that's who they are. That's the identity that they want to carry. It's not that smart. I'm not saying it's that smart, but you got to remember, I'm an LSU alum. I watched it for a long time happen. It's it's a part of what we've watched this year and kind of been, quite frankly, disappointed in the fact that I believe you have a really good quarterback that can throw the ball. Now, obviously, in South Carolina, we have 4 turnovers that'll make everybody get scared, I guess, to really let the ball go. But I think Jake Fromm is as good as anybody in the country if you give him those opportunities. And also, just not been – this offense has been vanilla. It's been predictable and kind of arrogant in a way. You got to adjust to what teams are doing. Teams are going to try to take away how physical your offensive line is, how good DeAndre Swift and Harrion is. So you have to figure out ways around that. I know it's youth at receiver. I know it's new relationships. But if you're a team that's vying to try to get in the college football playoff and even in the SEC championship, you're going to have to toss the ball around the yard a little bit. So we'll see what happens tomorrow because Florida, this will be one of the best defenses, if not the best defense they played all season long. And in order to beat this team, you're going to have to throw the ball.
On the other side, what's Florida done so effectively with Kyle Trask at quarterback in comparison to Felipe Franks?
Take care of the ball. I think sometimes, we get enamored with these guys that throw for 500-600 yards and 5 touchdowns. Sometimes you need guys that's just going to make the right plays, convert third downs, and when you get in the red area, be better. And I was on record saying that this team probably is in better hands. As tragic as it was what happened to Felipe, and we ain't talking life or death, but to see a guy, sustain an injury like that and not be able to play the rest of the year, I thought they would be in a better situation with Kyle. He's been sitting on the sideline watching football, getting a great concept and grasping what this offense can be. We've seen Dan Mullen work with quarterbacks and they become better. So now you see that. And I think the main thing is he just not turning the ball over. And also, not relying on the fact that, Felipe a lot sometimes relied on the fact that he had a cannon. Sometimes you want to methodically move the ball downfield. And Dan Mullen does a great job with that, man. He's one of those coaches that can get you to fall into the type of game he wants to play as well as anybody. And that quality that he has sometimes is more suited for guys that are not chance takers per se. You look at Dak now, like that's the same scenario. Dak was very consistent with the ball, didn't turn the ball over. Didn't mean he wasn't a good quarterback and couldn't play at an elite level, but Dan is not going to ask his quarterbacks to do anything they don't do well, and I think that's what makes him successful.
You think this game, along with LSU Alabama, is pretty much the semifinals for the SEC?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm telling you, if Auburn didn't have a freshman quarterback that was trying to figure things out, that's a really good team. And obviously Alabama still has to play that game in Jordan-Hare. So, but I would say more so on this side of the conference, yeah. Georgia still has to play Auburn, but man, this is as good as it gets. We got 4 teams in the top 10, and they all playing each other within a 2-week span. So it's that's as good as it gets, man.
I don't want to get too off topic, but Joey Gatewood's actually a local product from Bartram Trail High School. What do you think of that whole situation over there at Auburn, saying that they're a pretty good team besides what's happening at quarterback right now?
Yeah, well, if you guys pay attention to anything I would say, I thought Joey was going to start this year. I thought he looked better in the spring than Bo Nix. But obviously Gus saw something in Bo that he thought would matriculate this offense better. And Bo has done a good job to be a freshman in some of the environments that he's had to play in, and he's kind of held the fort down. I actually thought he would try Gatewood in the LSU game, with it being that close, maybe get a spark, or see if he could come in and just be the difference. I mean, that was LSU is number one in the country playing great. That was a 3-point game. They won 23-20. So it wasn't like it was, this blowout where you get a guy some reps that really don't matter. I know he brought him in the red area and then took him out after one play. So I don't know, man. It's interesting to me when you got young quarterbacks and one is struggling. And I know you want to keep his confidence up, but in that particular situation, I thought Joy should have got a little run to see if he could do something different. He's a big body, athletic kid, can throw the ball, but does he take Auburn over the top? I don't know, because we hadn't seen it, but a lot of things that I saw him do in the spring, I was like, ooh, they might have something with him.
How do you think Georgia matches up with Auburn? I know we've talked a lot about this game. You just talked how good Auburn is. If Georgia wins, they're not home free, are they?
I'll tell you what. That 7-man box down there in Auburn, Alabama, different than everywhere else. So they better figure out how to throw it around when they play them. Because I'm telling you from experience, you ain't lining up against them 4 to 7 monsters in the middle of that defense and thinking you're going to run it 50 times. Like, it just ain't going to happen. 5 is as good as they get at D-tackle. He's a game changer in Derrick Brown. So, look, it'll be interesting to see tomorrow, though. Grantham is going to throw a lot at him, like he always does. Florida is not as physical at the interior as Auburn, but they grown men too. I mean, you think back to that game at Baton Rouge, that wasn't a blowout. That happened late as well. So Georgia just they just can't be complacent, man. And I know they're built on running the football, built on being physical. A lot about this offensive line and how physical they are. But with that being said, they can pass protect too. You got a quarterback that makes good decisions and has shown you over time that you can trust him with the ball to push it downfield. So we'll see. We'll see tomorrow, man. But it's, you there now. Ain't no more time to try to figure out who you are. You better be who you are, and if you can throw it, you need to throw it at this point, because that's the only way you're going to even yourself out with a lot of teams.
Last question.
I'm going to switch topics here a little bit. How do you feel about the whole athletes getting paid, college athletes?
Name, image, and likeness for me has always been, I thought it should have been non-negotiable a long time ago. There's parameters around it, but I just don't even like the foundational idea of guys not being able to profit off of their own name.
How do you think that will affect recruiting?
We'll see. I think it depends on what rules you can put in place around it. I'm not going to act like I'm smart enough to see what those rules will be, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, look, we have governing now over a lot of things. So to just have those things in place for people to think about, so you're not absent-minded or just blindly out there using that as a recruiting tool, is a good thing. But when it comes to athletes being able to, be paid off their name, image, and likeness, people forget, I'm not far removed from Ed O'Bannon in the NCAA game, right? So for me, this whole discussion is totally different when you see that get done. But it'll be interesting to see what takes place. A lot of people a lot smarter than me need to figure out how they gonna box it and make sure that it's not spilling out to being some kind of trade,
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you.
What's up, guys? How we doing?
All right, it's that time again, Tim.
Yeah, it's a good time of the year, though. That's that time. I love it. This is one of my favorite weekends of the year. Just this game means so much. The rivalry, Jacksonville, hometown, family, everything it represents. It's so fun. Look forward to it every year.
Look,
I'm glad Nation's here too.
Yeah, obviously, there's big games all across the country, but there's something different just about this neutral meeting point, the two teams, this lifelong rivalry?
Yeah, there are a lot of great atmospheres for college football, but very few like this. A lot of good home and homes, but this one on neutral site, being here in Jacksonville, the atmosphere here, which we're not allowed to call it its name, but the rivalry, the dislike, the state versus state, the high school recruiting, everything into it. I just think just breeds a really exciting, awesome game. That half and half in the stadium, the red and black, the orange and blue. It's a good one.
Is this the matchup for the SEC East?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's going to be a lot of other big games. Georgia still has to play Auburn. Florida have to play Missouri. There's some big games, but this is a difference maker.
What are you looking forward to offensively wise for the Gators? What are you hyped, excited to see?
I think they've done a really good job as receivers and running backs have been able to make a lot of big plays after the contact or breaking tackles. I think that'll be another big key in this game. I think that's what won the game against Auburn. It is what won the game against Auburn. To be able to break the long 80-yard run, is through broken tackles. Really good design, but then be able to beat me in coverage and win. I think that'll be another key in this game. They were able to get some against LSU, but not in the fourth quarter, and I think that'd be a huge key.
Defensively then, too?
Getting pressure on Jake. I think, having two fresh defensive ends that you don't have to necessarily win to where you get sacks or forced fumbles, but just to be able to move him off his spot, take his eyes off of the coverage, just slow down his rhythm a little bit. That would have been huge against LSU in last year. Last year, Jake was on fire on third down. It's where they got a bunch of their touchdowns, especially starting the game. And on those third and longs, maybe when you have Grenard and a Zuniga healthy that are just, being able to disrupt the presence of the quarterback, that, could change the outcome of a game.
Tim, how sold are you on the Georgia defense? They haven't played an opponent with the depth at receiver of the Gators this far.
Yeah, I think they've had a good season. I think, they haven't been tested by necessarily that many good offenses yet. So I think they've come up in some big moments against a good Notre Dame team when they had to stop them. I think it's a good defense. I think they can show if they're great or not, though, which some of the Georgia defenses of the past really showed up in big moments to do that. And so it'll be a big test to see if they will, and they can.
Weather forecast is kind of up in the air tomorrow. How could that
affect what? The game? How so?
Like some rain.
Oh, really? Game time?
Right before game time.
Yeah, I didn't think Georgia handled it well against Kentucky. I didn't like anything about it, to be honest with you. Rain can sometimes distort an offense, or it can help an offense. I always felt it was an advantage. I felt the defense is going to slip. It's going to be easier for me to run over defenders and drive through them. They don't know where receivers cutting. I loved it. I honestly, it was some of my favorites. I thought other people hesitated more. They were slower. It was one of my favorites. So I think it's a mentality that they have. I don't think we've really seen this Florida team play too much in the rain. We haven't seen Kyle handle the rain, so that's more of an unknown. I think we've seen Georgia, and I think their defense played really well in the rain. But I think their offense would have to play better than they did against Kentucky.
Look, Tim, you've been in their shoes. Tell me about the nerves, especially for these younger players.
It's a joke. This game, the nerves are an absolute joke. I think it was even more so for me because I put a lot of the pressure on myself too in this game. One, just coming home, my family here, what it meant to my dad. It was a lot. So I put a lot of pressure. And I'll tell you, when we come over that Hart Bridge and you see that sea of people, your stomach's turning. And if you say it's not, then I just don't know if you're always being honest with yourself. And I remember my junior year getting ready for a Georgia team that had stupid amount of talent. Matt Stafford, AJ Green, Justin Houston, Noshawn Marino, Massaquoi, Rennie Curran, Geno Atkins. I mean, just the list of studs was a joke. That week, I remember getting several migraines because all the stress I was putting on studying so much and preparing for that game. Probably the most I've prepared for any game in my life. because it just meant that much. That's what this game does. It's just different.
Can you talk about Coach Grantham and just what he's been able to do on the offensive side of the ball?
Sure. Yeah, I think Coach Grantham's one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. I think his scheme really gives him an edge. They're able to bring it off nub sides, corner pressures, bring Sam Strong safety from the field back and forth, and they bring so many looks. I think it would also help though if they're able to get more pressure without blitzing, and so they don't always have to pressure to get to move the quarterback off his spot. And if they can do that, then it goes from a defense that's good, sometimes really good to maybe great.
And then lots talked about Coach Mullen, but Coach Johnson's done a great job.
Great job.
Kind of behind the scenes.
Great
Can you talk
job.
about him?
Yeah, I think Coach Johnson, Brian's done a great job. I think he does a really good job being patient with the quarterbacks, listening to the questions that they're asking, and being able to break a game down, or break a play down, a formation down, whatever they're going through down to really a great way to be able to understand it. And I think he did a great job when Kyle was the backup of preparing Kyle in case he was going to be the starter. And just remember sitting in meetings and listening to their communication, Kyle asking questions and Brian break it down, and that's what prepared Kyle to be ready for this moment. Give Kyle a lot of credit, because he focused and studied and prepared, but it's a great coaching job in my opinion.
If you were James Coley, how would you flip the script? You've been vocal about the criticism of the Georgia offense. What would you do differently, or how do you think?
Be aggressive. I would be aggressive early. I would take my shots. They did it last year, and I thought it was very effective. It's not that you want to be critical of him. He's new and he's figuring it out. This is his first time with Jake and figuring it out, and it's Jake's first time with him and their offense, so they're trying to figure it out. But I just think where the offenses are right now in the SEC, you look to be the best in the SEC. You look at the way Florida's kind of keeping people off balance offensively. What LSU is doing with Joe Brady, what is happening with the RPO at Alabama. Those offenses, for most of the defenses, you can literally see them on their heels trying to figure it out, not knowing, is it run, is it pass, is it play action, are we going to have a zone read? There's so many options you're throwing at them. And then when you get to Georgia, it's not the same options. It's not the same keep them on their heels. Look at the South Carolina game. It's very clear. They were playing, I think, man coverage 24 times. Every time they were playing soft off man and catching them at 6 to 8 yards because they knew what was coming. They were being aggressive with them, being physical with the receivers. So I think if I'm Georgia, I take shots early. When I get them in quarters, I'm taking a shot at my post. When I get them in man coverage, I'm taking a shot of Cager's playing. I'm being able to start out and empty and motioning DeAndre back in and being able to continue to use my weapons in a way that keeps the defense off balance and gives DeAndre, who still could be the best running back in the country, the ability to be the best and not have a defense key on him. But I think that's why we love this game so much, is because there's so many ways to break it down, to evaluate it. And just because Georgia hasn't been that efficient, effective, or probably what we thought they would be offensively, doesn't mean they can't tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. That's what a great game plan does and changes. And so, I was just telling it on Paul's show, Georgia, although I think some fans would probably say it's been a little disappointing for them, everything is still right in front of them for them to win the East and compete for SEC and national championship. Everything's in front of them. It just doesn't click. And if it can click and come together, then you still have a very dangerous team.
Real quick, how do you feel about athletes getting paid?
I think that I explained that like a lot of different times. I think that I'm in favor of being able to support the athletes, of being able to do that financially, holistically. I think it's how we do it that's really important. And so, I'm in favor of being able to take care of them, but I want to take care of them holistically in every way possible. And I think one of the things that I'm also passionate about is 78% of players that stop playing in the NFL go broke within 2 years. So there's also a part of it that we got to continue to holistically help our student athletes and learning and developing and being ready to take on life after sports. And I think that's incredibly important. But there's so many ways to look at it that I just want to be a part of the solution of finding better ways to help in all these areas. I do think finances need to be part of it. I don't know that necessarily that just having a free-for-all is the way to go. So I'm really intrigued to see with the rulings that they say, name and likeness with the collegiate model. I don't know what that means. And they say they're going to put into some rules into recruiting. I don't know what that means either. And so I think it's just interesting to be able to see how it all comes together. And I really hope that they do a good job, because I think the game means a lot to a lot of us, but more importantly, the student athletes mean a lot, because we need to set them up in the right position to succeed in every area of life in their future.
Thanks, guys, so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate